So let's get going. So talk a little bit on PCI. I mean, everybody who is familiar with PCI kind of gets it in the same way. It's you're with the company, it's hey, we need to make money, not just from the venture capitalists, and it was due yesterday, so we need to get it done. It's really common in a lot of businesses, and I wanted to kind of tell a little bit of what I've learned. So I've been working in payment security, payment processing for about 17 years now, and I've seen a lot of horrible things happen in the world that is PCI and other compliance, and wanted to say some of the things that people who are actually security minded should know about PCI and what they can do to prevent the people who aren't security minded telling them what they need to do for PCI. By quick show of hands, how many people are actually really familiar with PCI already? Okay. Also by show of hands, how many people are actually doing credit card processing as part of your daily job? Okay, good, excellent. How many people, by a show of hands, actually don't really know PCI very well, they just know they have to do it? Yeah, that's actually a really common one too. So what is PCI? Hopefully I'm not the only one who gets the joke here, but really PCI is all about managing fraud exposure. What it is the credit card networks trying to cover their butts. See, credit card networks are really old school. A lot of the processing is still done on mainframes with COBOL and RPG. They have old archaic systems that just aren't really secure. They don't use any modern practices, and they've just been pushed on for years and years to keep adding layers and layers of accessibility and new features. They've been slow to adapt to it and slow to work with it, but it's out there, and so they don't want to be liable themselves for any fraud that happens on someone's card. So they push that out towards the edge. And when you get your merchant account to process credit cards, you need to sign on saying, hey, I'm going to do my best to keep these secure, and to do that, I'm going to do what's called PCI compliance, which is where the credit card networks got together and defined a set of rules saying, if you want to process credit cards, you have to meet this set of standards to be able to work with us. If you don't meet those standards, you're the one responsible for anything that happens. Okay? So really, PCI compared to what I like to call real compliance, which I also have to do work with, things like Sarbanes-Oxley or HIPAA, SAS 70, those are ones that are defined usually by government entities. They have large legal considerations with them. PCI is just your merchant account. Now, just we'll cover what they can do with that and why it's really dangerous and why you still need to care. But it is very different from other types of compliance. It is just who you're dealing with. So banks instead of government, if you really think there's that much difference between them. So a common situation for a lot of companies is someone in business or marketing or sales department will get some kind of notice from their merchant account that, hey, guess what? Your annual PCI compliance is due. You better make sure that's done. And they won't know what they're doing. They just know that we need credit cards, so therefore, let's run around, find somebody who's going to sell us our compliance certificate. We'll get that, we'll be good, we're done, we're happy. And then the next year they say, yeah, I guess next year maybe I'll do something about that. And they wait another year until at the last minute they need to go find somebody else again to pay money to say that they're secure. That's the wrong way to do PCI compliance. And the point of this talk, help you guys take a more active role and be prepared for this so you can save your company a lot of money, and you can also use the rules of PCI to get real security done in your company. So one of the things, though, that really annoys me PCI compliance is I've had a lot of companies that I've done consulting with or that I've worked for directly, and I walk in and I start telling them about where they are on their compliance currently, and usually I'll get thrown over to like the system administrator or network administrator, and I'll get something like this. Okay? They'll just say, yeah, we passed that external scan, so we're obviously PCI compliant. That is a major facepalm moment. You'll understand that more in this presentation, but please don't ever give that answer. I will choke you. Talking about what can go wrong if you don't pass your PCI, if you don't have your compliance, the first thing is you can just lose your merchant account. This has actually happened quite a few times where the banks have come in and just said, sorry, you're not allowed to do credit cards anymore. How many of you guys that would cause a problem with doing business, right? That can be a very major concern. If they walk in and just say, hey, until you're compliant, you ain't touching a card. can have some serious problems. But they can also actually come in and start saying, giving fines. So they can start coming in and say, hey, you know, we looked at the overall process here and we saw that there was fraud, and so because we have to take care of that fraud and assume the payments that are all charged back, whatever, we're going to charge you $1 million plus you're losing your account. Or any little thing, they can make up their own fines to go with what they find in your system, depending on your documentation. I've known one company that got charged $1,000 per CVV2 code that they saw on the system. Considering the fact they had several hundreds of thousands of credit cards in their system, added up real quick. And that was just one part of the total fines that they received. They can also do things where if your compliance isn't in order, they can just start charging more fees. So your operational costs go up over time. And this isn't something that happens just once. They can do that over a long period of time. So if you're not up to date, hey, maybe you'll just lose 1% of your operational processing charges for the next 5 years. That's a big deal. And also these fines and these penalties can be per brand. So per MasterCard, American Express, each one comes in with their own terms and says, these are my penalties for you. So it can really escalate really quickly. A couple more things about PCI. PCI is not good security. I want everybody to have that in their head right away. PCI is a minimal set of acceptable policies. Okay, there's a big difference between those, and hopefully those people here at a security conference can understand the difference. Do not ever think that, yeah, we're PCI, so we're secure. No, it's a bare minimum standard that you need to be able to process a credit card. PC is not just remote assessments, it's actually everything that you do in your company to make it work. PCI is never an exact set of procedures. Anybody who comes in, usually vendors, and saying, hey, we have the exact PCI flow and everything you need to do, well, that's wrong. It's always subject to your own business, just like security is. You need to look at the way you're doing, what your applications are, what your development framework is, and work within those. And PCI is definitely not a requirement to buy any single product. Okay, there are certain things where there are approved vendors or approved products in certain categories that you can use or look to see if they did go through a validation process to help you in your PCI compliance, but you do not have to buy any single thing. Okay, so what does PCI cover? PCI actually cares about just this data. That's all there is. If you look on your left-hand side, these are the ones most people regularly think of. I mean, the first one is the actual credit card number, right? They care about that being secure. The cardholder name is actually important because most people, that's about all the authentication they use. The expiration date is important, and the service code. The service code is not the CVV number. It's a different identity on the card. Those pieces of data are the ones that you can actually store and use for things like recurring charges. So these are important pieces of information if you're doing a renewals business, stuff you might have to store and work with. On the other side, though, it's called the sensitive authentication data. Full track if you're doing magnetic swipes or if you were doing chip data, the CVV code, or any kind of pins. So, it's nice that we're actually getting chips here in the US finally, but we're still being really dumb and we don't actually do the PIN code to go with them. But if you were accepting and you had a card present situation and you stored that PIN number, you would be in big trouble. Anything on that sensitive authentication data side, if you actually write it down anywhere in your system, you are in big trouble. Okay, so that's the difference, delineating both those sides. On the one side, you can store, we'll get into how you can store it, but you got to keep, you got to keep careful. The other side, do not store whatsoever by any means. Let's see. Some of the things, though, if you'll notice, there's a lot of information that isn't in there, like, say, a social security number. Is social security number subject to PCI compliance? No, because it's the card brand. They don't care. Now, in good security, if you actually needed to store a social security number, do you want to keep it secure? Yes. Okay, so make your overall policy look into those things, but PCI itself doesn't care. So that's part of one of those important things to know, the difference between PCI compliance and, well, real good security. We're going to do this right. Other things like a customer's password. In this case, that's It's not PCI compliant. But the customer is really going to care if that data leaked and it let them get into their billing information. Another question is, what are you certifying? So in the world of PCI, there's actually, it's acronym hell. There are all sorts of different acronyms that you have to learn and try and distinguish between them, and one of them is just the type of PCI that you're getting into. A couple of them I list here, things like PTS or PADSS are examples of different PCIs depending on what you're doing. So if you're developing hardware that actually, reads chips, then you're going to actually need to look into stuff like the PTS, pin transaction. It has its own qualification system for qualifying your hardware to be certified to be sold. It has a different set of rules and things you need to do that's still under the general PCI umbrella, but separate from, say, the PADSS, which is for authorizing software that you wrote to run payment processing for somebody else to be sold. Okay? But a common problem is a lot of people look at that and say, well, I write software that does payment processing, so do I need to get PADSS? Well, if you're writing software for yourself, no. That only covers software that you're selling as a drop-in PCI compliant piece of software. If you're writing something for yourself, don't worry, you're just regular PCI. Then when you're doing the PCI, you need to understand what an SAQ is. The SAQ is the self-assessment questionnaire, which is how you go through and start looking at, am I qualified? Do I meet all the different items? Well, there's several different types of them. Okay? If you're running just a business that processes cards for making money, well, you need to define which one of these you are. How you define that, of course, means you're going to talk to your merchant account and they're going to review what you do and tell you which one you need. But in general, this is what's important. SAQ-A is the easiest one. SAQ-A means, guess what? We run credit cards, but it's all through their software. Third-party stuff doesn't touch us. Really easy, right? It's just get their certifications, we're done. SAQ-B, imprint. Remember the old swipe? We don't actually store anything electronically. Doesn't fit most of us. Virtual terminals, if you only do business through that, you've got a special one. If you have a certified payment application and you don't store it, you can do a C, but really 95% of the people, if not more, are really just SAQ-D, which is the everything else category, which means you have to go through a lot more little check boxes and review quite a few more things, but don't worry, we're here to explain a lot of those for you. SAQ-D, though, is probably what you're going to need if you're processing credit cards, which means you're going to pull up the full PCI, and you're going to go through all these different points. Now, who does it? I keep saying you do it, but hopefully that is. But there's also a couple points. More of the jargon. You have QSAs. Anybody here a QSA? Yeah, a couple of them over there. QSA usually means it's the outside party that you hired to come help do this. They're a qualified security assessor. They went through all the different classes, made sure they got certified so that they can represent your company and sign off that all the work was done correctly. Most companies, this is what you're going to use. If you're a really small company, some of them have really inexpensive ways to do your QSA through a simple service. If you're a medium-sized company, it's going to cost a bit more because this person has to do quite a bit more work. And you'll see as we get into the documentation section why it's quite a bit of work. This external person is going to have to come in and they're going to have to spend time with quite a few people in your company, going through paperwork, double-checking things, getting proof that you're actually doing what PCI compliance is. And so it's going to take them some time. They're going to fill out all the paperwork, get it done. You're going to sign off on their work, and then they sign it saying, yeah, I verified this is true. But there are some other options. If your company's a little larger, you can look into the ISA program. So me personally, I'm an ISA at my day job. And what it is, it allows you to qualify someone internal to your company to do the same work as a QSA internally. Sorry. The ISA program isn't that cheap, just like most kind of certifications. It's going to take about $2,500, and the first time you do it, you're going to have to go to a remote training. Annual reviews you can actually do online, though. But it's actually a really good program if you want to take care of this yourself, and if you want people to take care of your PCI throughout the year, so it's not just a single crunch at your renewal point. It's also a really good program to be able to spread the load a little. So PCI, as we cover today, hits a lot of your business. You'll have everything from HR, sometimes accounting, you'll have NetOps, you'll have developers, and you need representatives of them who can correctly point out what your practices are, how your business is working, and be able to prove each of these little points. So if each of those departments has a representative that's ISA trained, they can do the paperwork and they can make sure things are in place ahead of time with sufficient knowledge, and so you can get it done faster. This has been a good program, I know, for larger companies like ours, where it's made us get things through much faster. Now, one of the important things about the ISA, though, when you qualify as an ISA, you are not just an ISA that can go anywhere. You are qualified only for the company you're currently with. So if you leave to go somewhere else, that ISA qualification isn't valid anymore. That's one of the little trade-offs they did to make sure that, people wouldn't train and then immediately jump somewhere else. Let's see. A little bit more information about PCI. PCI is a 3-year cycle between versions. So you have a time where the standards are published, you get a chance to review them, begin adoption. There's review points within it to make any necessary changes, and then get things ready for the next year's changes that need to happen. Right now we're in the middle point. We're in PCI version 3, technically 3.1. And if you are interested, as you notice, the October, November is when they have the open meetings if you want to provide information for the next set changes. This is a committee, a group process that you can submit information to, submit changes. So it's kind of interesting sometimes to watch that and see who is submitting in terms of businesses trying to pull it one direction, or actual admin people who know what's going on security-wise trying to pull it to real security. It's a great time to get in there and help things out. So example of some of the changes that can happen during that stream is recently we just had the 3 to 3.1 changes. Those took place in July 1st. One of the big things that came out, of course, was death to SSL, right? You cannot be PCI running on any version of SSL or low versions of TLS. Okay? Anybody who's security-minded should know that, but guess what? You need to make sure your company is actually enforcing that if you want to run credit cards. Other things that changed in the 3 to 3.1 were some of the time requirements and some of the things you needed to do for pen testing. We'll review those when we get to that section. So, covering PCI. Basically, this next little bit, I'm going to try and take 2 days of PCI training, bring them down to our next half hour, highlighting some of the things that an actually security-minded person will want to know about these general sections. So out of these, you'll see like a number, section 1 of building and maintaining a secure network. That actually is a full section of PCI. You have subpoints, sub-subpoints within there of lots of little things you need to check and do. Each of these sections is like that. But I'll give you this nice high level so you can actually refer to it or know where to look if something interests you. So the first thing, of course, says install, maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. Now, obviously, if you're processing credit cards, you want a firewall, right? Well, most people don't necessarily think about that or think about what it means to do a firewall correctly. This is something that can help keep you honest. How many people here are involved in NetOps in their company? Got a couple in the back there. So NetOps, this first area is probably some of the ones you're going to care about the most. The others, not as much, but pay attention, into here. Now, the first and most important thing in there is documentation. Every one of these sections in PCI, the most important thing is you have to have everything documented like crazy. Okay? When a QSA comes in, they're going to ask to see your network diagrams, your card data flow diagrams, your hardware stack and inventory, all of that stuff, your router configurations. They need all of that documented. They also need to know all of the change management for making changes in there, and they're going to need you to prove that that's actually happening in the case. Okay, so if you want to get ready and you're for PCI and you're a NetOps person, Make sure you have all that paperwork. Otherwise, you're going to have a QSA sitting in your office being really tired and bored saying, please just make all this, prove it to me. Some of the things they're going to check is they want to see the ingress and egress out of your data environment. They want you to be able to prove that nothing can accidentally happen out of what you've documented. And part of that is they're going to want to know the scope of your system. This text right here is actually lifted straight out of PCI 3, the introduction to scoping. They give a description there of what the cardholder data environment is, CDE. Another of those acronyms that they're going to go crazy about, demanding to know. CDE is that important world that you have to separate. This is my entire business. This is the piece that PCI actually cares about. And as you start doing all the documentation, you'll realize really quick you want as many things out of that scope as you can. Same thing with a security-minded person. You obviously want that important data covering as little of your footprint as possible, because that's the part you need on the most, right? So you need to look at, how can I segment my network? How can I limit the devices this touches? Some of the things that scope is really going to care about is that a lot of people don't necessarily think about unless they're security minded, is part of your holder data environment is your firewall device, if you have a separate device. It's your switches, it's your routers, it's the power systems they're plugged into possibly, especially if they have control. It's the box itself, right? It's anything that those reach out to or that reaches into. Those are examples of what a lot of people don't think about. If a box is part of your cardholder data environment and it needs to go and DNS resolution, where does it go? If that box, if the DNS resolver is outside of your cardholder data environment, that's an area that people can try and exploit to get in, provide DNS spoofing. So therefore, the DNS that you're consuming is a part of your cardholder data. Right? Obviously, NTP can be attacked and can be used to modify your environment. So wherever you get your NTP from, part of your cardholder data environment. Sometimes your cardholder data environment isn't just hardware or boxes, but it might be people. There's a manual process. Someone has to see that data and move it or do something with it. All of a sudden, their role, their workstation, all become part of your environment. Obviously, the smart security person looks at that immediately and says, I need to narrow my focus. That's a good thing. That's one of those things you do throughout the year of limiting your scope. Get it down to as small a footprint, small a face as you can. It's good security versus just the regular PCI, which it will explode because most people don't think about just how far their data goes. So same thing, looking at some of the features there. So the second section, do not use vendor-supplied defaults for system passwords. That should really be a no-brainer, right? We don't want something in our network that has admin access, or Cisco's provider. One thing that some people don't think about, though, is they'll put the device in the network and then go to take that access away. No, it's the opposite. You have to take that access away before the device goes into your network. All right, you need to start creating policies like that for getting that removed. There's other kinds of defaults in a system, though, that you need to take care of. Different places they might reach out to. Of course, my notes aren't showing all the way here. Different things that your system just might do in general and have behaviors, the automated startup features in an operating system that you don't need. Getting rid of things that you really don't need on a system. Nix it out, get it down to the minimal things that you want. The next two sections of PCI cover the actual data itself, right? How do we keep that secure? If you remember, the stuff that we could actually use repeatedly, well, how do we take care of that? First of all, keep storage at a minimum, right? Any kind of developer, or if they're in a business intelligence, they're going to say, hey, let's just write everything down. Think of all the analytics we can do. Think of what we can do with this afterwards. Yeah, but also think that you're now liable for everything you're holding. Okay, so you need to start working at how do I get rid of it. One of the first things they do is they talk about data retention policies. So you need a point where if you stored a credit card, at what point do you get rid of it? It needs to be documented, and you need to show that you are actually getting rid of cards that you no longer need, right? And that's good security, and it's a way to get your PCI better. Remember, once again, sensitive data can't be stored at all. And that doesn't just mean things that you intended to use, but even accidentally. Some common places that people will accidentally store sensitive authentication data is, say, an access log. If you have anywhere that allows a get, and people just do a get string and it has something in there, it just wrote to your Apache log. If you have error logs where maybe a core dump or some application just dumps memory, well, guess what's getting written down there? If the bank comes in, looks at that, you're going to get fined. You're going to have serious problems. So you have to look at an approach of working with your developers or your application provider of making sure that that doesn't get written down in any way through any kind of accident. I know we've got a module in Perl that helps with that in some of my day job stuff, where even if somebody seg faults on a box and it tries to dump a core dump, we have this other process that catches things midstream and will purposefully get rid of anything that we consider possible sensitive data, say like a CVV, the PAN, anything like that will get truncated and removed and just marked with a, hey, this would have accidentally showed up, so that we can monitor that, track it, and say, here's a place that we could have had a problem, but we caught it ahead of time. And that's the kind of thing that you need to think about. Where could I accidentally be leaking this information? Did I have one of my network admins go onto the router and do some packet sniffing because maybe they were checking for something else, and then they accidentally left it on, and it was just logging out some information that just caught it in midstream? That's a problem. You can't allow that. Also, in terms of protecting the cardholder data, you have to think about how it's transmitted. So this is one of those things where I have a great point of PCI is not actually good security. PCI does not require you to encrypt network connections on your or inside your CDE. So if you have box A and box B and you've defined them both to be in your network and in behind your firewall, they're okay with you passing them plain text. I think that's just a bad policy. Okay? Encrypt it, always. That way, if it accidentally does leak, or if somebody gets partway into your system, it's still protected. But that you do have the requirement in PCI of any time it is going over a public network, you need to make sure it's encrypted and encrypted correctly. Just like I mentioned, SSL, no longer good enough. Make sure that you're not using it. You probably noticed sometime around May and June, a lot of banks and a lot of services were finally putting up their policies saying, we are upgrading and will no longer be using SSL. That was because July 1st was their deadline and they were going to be cut off if they didn't have it forcefully out by then. Some other things about the encrypted transmission. There are old systems. Sometimes people say are using a mainframe or something like that and they need to be PCI compliant, and that mainframe only allowed Telnet. Well, what do? You have to do something to get that going over a VPN, do something like that, right? You have to force a way for it to be on an encrypted transmission. So with cryptography and with storing your keys, learn what good cryptography is, please. There are great presentations here at St. Con, just like with most of our other topics, but talking about what real cryptography is, right? You need to learn why you don't use MD5 if you're doing hashing, right? Why is that a bad thing? Well, there's classes here teaching about it, but just know that it is. Dave was talking earlier about some of the problems with other types of false randomization. You need to understand why that's an issue. You need to make sure your developers understand why that's an issue and how they can guarantee they're not doing things wrong. Also, you want to make sure you don't reinvent the wheel. I've gone into several different companies that thought they had come up with the next greatest thing on how to store a credit card. And it wound up being just, they tried some obfuscation and really wasn't that hard, and we were still able to break it when pen testing, right? Use tools. This is one of those cases where
There are smarter people out there. Use what they've already created. Sometimes that might be, hey, we're just going to pay and use someone else's tokenization service. Oftentimes that's a great idea. If you don't have the manpower to do it, right, pay someone just a tiny amount and let them take care of that for you and assume the liability. Sometimes though, maybe you're a large enough client, maybe you've got smart enough people in-house, you can do your own tokenization. Have the resources for it. But there's a time and a place for each of those, and you need to decide based on what you have. Make sure you're doing real cert validation as well. Especially with recent attacks on RSA, some of the lower level RSAs. Make sure your certificates are good. Make sure you're doing proper validation on them. Next topics, the vulnerability management program. Now, Section 5 is one of those areas that I hate the most of PCI because the most people tend to mess it up. This is the one where people will come in and say, you need to run antivirus on your Linux box. And it has to be, like McAfee, because I know that's a good one. That's bad policy being mandated, usually from an outside source. Now, what the system really says is if you have a box that is subject to attacks of certain types of viruses, Trojans, etc., you need tools in place to prevent that, to detect it. Okay? So as a security-minded person, if you're a system administrator, take the initiative, make sure you're doing the right thing, document it, and make sure that your automation system is enforcing it. Okay? If you want to, if you're running Linux, you start using things like Tripwire, some good intrusion detection systems, maybe PSAD, different tools like that, and document how those are searching and doing proper work for malware on the system that they're involved with. If you're using Windows, maybe you do want to use something like Sophos or McAfee or whatever your personal decision is, but make sure you have it documented, you have it enforced that it is running, and it's the right tool for the job. But don't let someone come in and tell you that you need to run a specific product because of PCI, right? Take control of this, do it right, document it. Let's see. The next one, develop and maintain secure systems and applications. And the next slide actually really helps more with that. These are the actual, or two of the actual parts from that section that are really important. So establishing a process and categorizing different vulnerabilities. Are there any systems out there that do that for you? There's some great ones, and in PCI they actually refer to some of them. I mean, you've got NIST, you've got OWASP, you've got different tools like that. Subscribe to them, know what's going on, be up to date on vulnerabilities, and make sure you're patching for them and dealing with them. That's exactly what this is. If you're using some kind of enterprise support for your software, make sure it's getting applied correctly, up to date. If it's a high level problem, you do have 1 month to get that sucker patched, to get it in place. Keep track of it, make sure you're up to date. It's your responsibility, and you're signing off, if you're a system administrator, that you're doing this, and that you're making sure and you're guaranteeing it's applied to all the right systems. Right? This is a case where, hopefully, if you're a good system administrator, you're saying, yeah, I've already got puppet rules that can apply this, and we have an automatic feed from OWASP, and we're making sure that we take care of them in this way. That's what you should be doing if you're already doing your job right. If you're out there monkey fixing every single box just because, maybe you heard about something or you got rooted the other day, well, you're reacting too late. You should have that proactive attitude, and once again, there's other classes here that teach you how to do that right, where to look, how to do the right thing. And also internally developed apps, like it says, measuring against that policy. So you need to, if you're a system administrator, if you're a network administrator, if you're a developer, you need to make sure you're policing the stuff that you use internally and judge them by these rules. So if you let your junior system administrator write some code that's being rolled out onto your router or to your, all your boxes, you need to make sure that that was double checked for any security holes. Same thing, if you've got your junior developer who's hacking on your credit card authorization form for signing up, you need to make sure you do some double checks and get that correct. Make sure that it's being double-checked by someone who knows what they're doing, who's able to test it, and make sure it goes correctly. This means you also need to make sure you're training developers, administrators, et cetera, in those policies. And that's part of the requirements that are in this section too, is train them. You have to make sure that you're keeping them up to date, that it's not just one person who maybe hopefully read this, but is actually discussed. It's presented. You know, if somebody found out how to do cross-site forgeries on your sign-up page, he didn't just fix it, he made sure that everybody knew how not to do that again. You need to get that policy in place. The next couple sections, strong access control measures. Some of the main things here is, with cardholder environment, please start off with denying people access, right? Nobody really needs to get into that data to look at actual credit card numbers, except in a very limited set of cases. And you need to have a policy of enforcing that people just won't get that data until there's a need to know, right? And that they need to go through some proper checkpoints to get there. Of course, they're going to care that you go through and everybody has unique IDs in the there be shared accounts in a cardholder environment. Please don't do that. You know, you don't want 5 people all using the same login because they're all customer support agents and, you know, we don't care. No, you need to enforce so you can track and control each person and what they're doing and keep track of that. So Section 8 also has one of the other points that I think a lot of us will feel frustrated with. Section 8 is the one that comes up and requires some of the dumbest password rules that you have experienced on the web and keep getting frustrated at every time you see them. This is the place that says you can't use one of your last 4 passwords, right? And, you know, maybe that's an okay idea, except that means you have to store the last 4 passwords to double check against. That's a bad idea. It's also the one that says you have to change passwords every 90 days. Well, there's definitely problems with that. And it's also the one that says, you know, minimum 8 characters must be at least, you know, uppercase, lowercase, and digits. Well, let's just work on actual real, you know, password or passphrasing instead of trying to do really limited entropy type sets. But that's another discussion, and once again, presentations here do better jobs of talking about cryptographically secure passwords. But there are requirements in there of what you enforce, and they're kind of stupid, but they're required. Physical access to cardholder data. If you're doing things right in a card not present situation, which is if you're doing internet purchases, it's card not present, you don't actually see the card, then this hopefully just means locking down your servers. But your scope defines if you're doing that right. So physical access means, hey, can anybody get to this box except the people that I've authorized? So I need to make sure my box is in a locked rack, that not just any admins, but only the specific people can get in there. But it's not just the box. Once again, it's the hardware, the switches, the network, the power, so nobody can get in and monkey with your system through some other door. It needs to be all completely separated. It needs to be in a data center that actually has video checks and monitors that stuff, that has, you know, 2-factor authentication to get into it. It actually limits. So there's quite a few sections in there for setting up a properly secure data center. Section 8 and Section 9. 10, 11, this is the one where most people actually fall down on a lot. So regularly monitor and test networks. So a lot of the times you'll have something, people say, you know, I set up a tool like PSAD and it just kind of logged a standard error or syslog. Maybe it emailed somebody, but that person gets 10 billion emails a day and they already had an auto-filter dev nulling that thing. That's no good. You actually have to have a proper, you know, process, people designated, who's monitoring the system, what is their SLA for returning, for noticing any of these alerts, are the alerts categorized correctly, intrusion detection, or whether, you know, an RPM got rolled out to one of your boxes incorrectly, anything like that. You need to have documented policies of how that's handled. who's watching it, who's going to notice it, what do they do when something goes wrong, because it does. One of the other things, this is where they shoved in the you must use time synchronization on your systems. That's shoved into this category instead of one of the others. Other things, the logging itself, where does that happen? Well, actually, you need to make sure it's done securely. Make sure I have a remote syslog that nobody else can write to or alter, right, for system access. Because, of course, if somebody roots your box, one of the first things they're going to do is try and cover up their trail. Well, that needs to be somewhere else that they can't check. But this also, the audit trails apply to your application developers. And a lot of the contracting I do is specifically on what people have done in their applications for billing processes. And almost all the time, you've got a bunch of developers that just, hey, somebody entered in this code and I'm going to shove it into a database and we processed, I just stored a transaction. That's not good enough. You actually have to store who did it, when they did it, what was the pre-state, what was the post-state. You need to keep track of all those things, because anytime that personal data, the PAN, anything that is accessed, they need to know who, why, how often have they been doing it. You need to then have monitoring. Is this person abusing the system? All of those things. Please start doing it correctly. But also, you need to make sure that your database has correct lockdowns on it. A lot of people, they'll just have one single set of passwords that the scripts use, that people use. They can get in and monkey with the system. No, that has to be changed. You need to make sure those are separate. They do a lot of pushing for, card access only through stored procedures, but that's not really necessary. But you do need to put some proper security mindset into how do I get that data? How do I make sure I know when it was accessed and what it was used for? And how can I come back and prove that at a later point? If you watched the NetFlow one in this class earlier, one of the points he made was great, where he talked about how long they were storing their network logs, and that's part of this monitoring. They said, hey, we made it very easy so we can store a year of data. Well, guess what? PCI says you need to have a year of all your audit logs available and 3 months rapidly available. That's part of PCI. So the next part of that was actually pen testing. And this is the area that was one of the areas I really liked that it was improved in the 3.1. With scanning, you have your ASV scan, which is what people know a lot about. You have to buy from one of the approved scanning vendors that they'll come and quarterly check your system, and annually you have to put a statement saying, yes, we're getting scanned and we passed. Well, the fact is the ASV, really pretty much every one of the vendors sucks in many ways. Seth and I at work, we've got a long list of rants that we give on a lot of them. We can do that as a different presentation. But ASVs, just try some basic testing of your system and say, hey, did you fit these exploits? No? Okay, you're good. It's very simplistic scanning. You can also do it yourself with several types of open software. If you just bring up Kali Linux, you got several tools in there. You can do some of your own scanning. But this one is necessary, so you do have to pay for it annually to get there. You can pick which vendor you want. Some vendors are better than others, and sometimes your merchant account will tell you, do not use vendor X because we don't like them. They're too lenient. Hopefully, if you've got a good merchant, they'll say some of those things. But 11.3 is really nice. They actually introduced enhanced requirements on actual penetration testing. So annually, you do need to get a real external penetration testing on your cardholder data environment. You need that. You need it approved. The documentation is involved in your PCI submission. But also, under 11.3, you need to do quarterly internal pen testing. So you need to have people in your company that are doing your own pen testing. And not only are you supposed to do it quarterly, but you're supposed to do it on any major config or system or application changes. So you need to come up with a group in your company that knows enough about what pen testing is. Come up with a red team, come up with a blue team, work with your system, go at it, and then they need to review it. I mean, the review group just says qualified personnel. If you're here, you're probably one of those people, and you can find the other ones in your company. Set up a group, do quarterly reviews at a minimum, also tie them in as part of your rollout process. Get that done so that you can make sure you are actually secure. So So this is a really good enhancement to PCI in 3.1. Take advantage of that, right? This is one of those great points where I can use PCI to my advantage and make sure we're actually pen testing our stuff and reviewing it and, you know, making good work with what we got out of the review. So the last section of PCI is section 12, maintain a policy that addresses, this is usually called the HR section at first. A lot of it has to do with HR policy. So it has to do with, how do I know the people that work in our cardholder environment are approved? Have we done background checks on them? This is tons of paperwork. You have to have a security policy. You have to make sure the security policy gets out, a risk assessment policy, a tech policy. You have to have a security awareness program that has to be, and these are two different subpoints in section 12, it has to be given on hire and explained to them, and they have to sign off saying they received it and understand it, and it has to be renewed annually with each employee in that environment. Now, sometimes that might seem like it's just busy work, but if you're security minded and you get really frustrated with the people around you, this is a great chance to get the word out, right? Take advantage of this and make sure things are going on there. I mean, we've many times, you know, with the don't send cardholder data in the open, this is where we push back on the, guess what your penalty will be if you IM somebody a credit card number? You'll get fired. Okay, we did that because people kept doing it. We had someone the other day who came in and said, oh yeah, we had a customer that called in, we thought it might be fraud, so we needed proof of identity. So we just had them email us a photocopy of their credit card. Right, this is the FML moment, and it was right before our renewal, and so we just said, you just made our entire email and ticketing systems in scope. Do you realize how much work that created for us? Right? So once again, we had to sit people down, go over the policy again, and show where they messed up, what this meant to the company, you know, the different work we had to do, and how we were able to get the information out. But yeah, section 12 is the HR section. It's a lot of policies. It's a lot of the other documentation you gave in the other sections and making sure they're standardized and they're known across the company. So the one other part of PCI that's really important, compensating controls. Compensating controls are the moment of, you know, PCI requires this. We do something different for a very specific reason. You have to fill out a compensating control document for each of those things saying why we do something different, how it's better than the control that's in place, you know, and you have to prove it for each one, and you have to give that in, and then it has to get approved from your merchant provider. Now, you mentioned compensating controls, and the last thing is what's really important. A lot of people say, oh, I'm getting something fixed, so we'll just do a compensating control saying we're fixing it. That doesn't fly, doesn't work. They will immediately say no. You are either PCI all the way 100%, or you are in process of working on it, and therefore not. So compensating controls are just the saying we need passwords for access to this box that have to meet these password requirements, but we actually use key-based authentication only, or we use this other two-factor authentication system. That's actually a better than requirement, and we're using it instead of passwords. Great. Compensating control, we're better. This is good. So to summarize real quick, PCI is a complex bureaucracy made up of a bunch of card networks, banks that are trying to cover their own butts. Great, but if you want to play in the world of credit cards, you have to be PCI compliant. So learn what PCI is. Being here is a great first step. The real security that's covered through the rest of SaintCon is great stuff. Use it, and with the knowledge you get there, if you know a little bit of PCI, you can use the PCI to enforce changes that are better security. Don't just let things happen, let someone else decide some of that, but actually take advantage of PCI to do the right thing. Big one of that, documentation. The QSAs over there will know, will say, the big work is, I need the documentation. You need to show me what the policy is. I need it written down. I need the flow charts. I need to see process flow, data flow. I need to see all the hardware, where all the routes are, and then I'm going to have you prove it. So if you document it first,
your life goes a lot easier. That guy's going to spend a lot less time at your desk, breathing down your neck, saying, I need to see this, I need to see this, I need to see this. Once you have that, execute the plan. If you've got it documented, well, that's a script. You can write the scripts, you can write the puppet manifest, whatever, and just make it happen automatically. Don't let things be special snowflakes. Special snowflakes break. They leak. They will melt. They will be problems. But actually, make sure the plan leads to your automation system and is enforced. It's asserted everywhere. Whether you're in network ops, whether you're DevOps, whether you're a developer, whether you're a system administrator, it applies the same. Make sure it influences what you're doing. If you have a problem, talk with your merchant account right away. They want open discussions. If you are having trouble getting PCI certified, if you have an issue, talk to them. They'll often grant you extensions if you're doing the work, if you're moving ahead. And they'll interface with that and say, yeah, you're doing the right thing. Let's see when you get that done. We'll help you with that. If you lie about it, though, and they come in and see an issue, you're in trouble, right? That's where all those penalties that we talked about earlier start happening. So don't lie about it. Be open. Approach them first. Talk to them. If you're using an external group for a QSA, talk to them. Same thing. They'll work with that and help negotiate. In fact, if you're delayed and you've got a good QSA that your merchant company respects, they're going to work really well with you, right? They're going to say, oh yeah, that person will double check and make sure it's right. And if he approved of your new policy, you're doing good. Okay, let's work towards that. Another thing, they can't take what you don't have. So please mind your data. Don't store more than you need to. Make sure you have a good policy of getting rid of things that you don't need, and it's really going to help you. That's better security, right? Don't do too much. And then last but not least, don't let this guy define your security policies, okay? Whether it's your VP of whatever who has a friend who sells some security product. No, you're here because you care about security, because you know it. Take advantage of the PCI. Use it for enforcing good policies in your company. It will make your life better. Use it to your advantage. And then just to help, some important documents, some of the things that you can get on the PCI Security Standards.org website that'll help you understand PCI a little bit better. The actual PCI requirements, if you want to review them now that you have a high-level understanding, they're all there and available for you. So any questions? All right, thank you.